classic. As a man said, James Allen. Wow. I repent to have lost him. I repent to have lost him. He followed me everywhere, but I snubbed him off with an air. He pursued me to listen to his sincere wishes, to win his fame and all his riches, but I'm bored of hearing it, said I, and don't mind staying without a pie. His ego was hurt, his mind disturbed far off. He went like lightning until I could catch sight of him. I twisted in bed all through the night till the morning brought its light. I looked for him in lovely gardens. I climbed many mountains to reach him. I swam 1,000 oceans to search him. I even looked for him in deep valleys. I fasted for days together. I climbed many mountains to reach him. I even fasted for days together and meditated for years in succession. But alas, 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 all is in vain, for now I am aged, having nothing gained. I cannot read, nor can I write. Unsuccessful in life's every field. So my only request to you, young folks, is try and gain knowledge wherever you go. For he comes but once to persuade you and then flies away with time, never again to turn behind. Remember, education is the only 9-letter word that has all the vowels in it. Just as no word can be formed without a vowel, no man can be formed without education. So educate yourself now. Now turn around, see you have won. Education is the key to success. Please see, after reading this poem, a totally illiterate man asked his best friend to teach him ABCD, also the vowels A, E, I, O, U. Next day, he started praying to God. 5 times A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. And on he went on saying A, E, I, O, U, A, U, I, O, U, A, E, I, O, U, until it started sounding like E, L, O, U, A, L, O, U. On asking, he said God forms the words himself. So I'm doing prayer to God. And since he will need lots of A, I love yous, let's give our surrender unto God. Let him form the words himself. So we submit our all unto him. This little volume, the result of meditation and experience, is not intended as an exhaustive treatise or much written upon subject of the power of thought. It is suggested rather than explanatory. Its object being to stimulate men and women to the discovery and perception of this truth that they themselves are the makers of themselves. By virtue of the thoughts which they choose and encourage the mind, that is the master weaver both of the inner garment of character and the outer garment of circumstance, that as they may have hitherto woven in ignorance and pain, they may now weave in enlightenment and happiness, thought and character. The aphorism, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he, not only embraces the whole of a man's being, but is so comprehensive as to reach out to every condition and circumstance of his life. A man is literally what he thinks, his character being the complete sum of all his thoughts. As the plant sprang from and could not be without the seed, so every act of the man springs from his hidden seeds of thought. He could not have appeared without them. This applies equally to those that call spontaneous and unpremeditated, as those which are deliberately executed. Act is the bosom of thought, and joy, suffering are his fruits, and thus does a man garner in the sweet and the bitter fruitage of his own husbandry. Thought in the mind hath made us what we are. By thought we wrought and built for man's mind. Hath evil thoughts, pains comes on him, as comes the wheel, the ox behind. If one endure the purity of thought, joy follows him as his own shadow sure. Man is a growth by law and not a creation by artifice, and cause and effect as absolute and undeviating in him. Hidden realm of the thought as in the world of the visible and material things. A noble and godlike character is not a thing of favor or chance, but a natural result of continual effort in the right thinking, the effect of long cherished association with godlike thoughts. An ignoble and bestial character by the same process is the result of continued harboring of groveling thoughts. Man is made by himself in the armory of the thought. He forges the weapons by which he destroys himself. He also fashions the tools with which he builds for himself heavenly mansions of joy and strength and peace. By the right choice and true application of the thought, man ascends to the divine perfection. By the abuse and the wrong application of thought, he descends below the level of the beast. Between these two extremes are all the grades of the character, and man is their maker and master. of all the beautiful truths pertaining to the soul which have been restored and brought to light in this age, none is more gladdening or fruitful of divine promise and confidence than this, that man is the master of thought, the molder of character, and the maker and shaper of condition, environment, and destiny. As a being of power, intelligence, and love, and the lord of his own thoughts, man holds in the key to every situation and contains within himself the transforming and regenerative agency by which he may make himself what he wills. Man is always the master, even in his weakest and most abundant state. But in his weakness and degradation is the foolish master who governs his household. When he begins to reflect upon his condition and to search diligently for the law upon which his being is established, he then becomes a wise master, directing his energies with intelligence and fashioning his thoughts to fruitful issues. Such is the conscious master. The man can only thus become by discovering within himself the laws of the thought, which discovery is totally a matter of application, self-analysis, and experiences. Only by much searching and mining a gold and diamonds obtained, the man can find every truth connected with his being. If he will dig deep into the mind of his soul, and that is, he is the maker of his character, molder of his life, and the builder of his destiny, he may unerringly prove. If he will watch, control, and alter his thoughts, stressing their effects upon himself, upon others, and upon his life and circumstances, linking cause and effect by patient practice and investigation, and utilizing his everyday experience, even to the most trivial everyday occurrence, as a means of obtaining that knowledge of himself which is understanding, wisdom, power in this direction as in no other, is the law absolute, that he that seeks find, and to him that knock it shall be opened. For only by patience, practice, and ceaseless importunity can a man enter the door of the temple of knowledge. Effect of thought on circumstances. A man's mind may be likened to a garden which may be intelligent and cultivated or allowed to run wild. But whether cultivated or neglected, it must and will bring forth. If no useful seeds are put into it, then the abundance of useless weed seeds will fall therein and will continue to produce their kind. Just as a gardener cultivates the plot, keeping it free from weeds and growing the flowers and fruits which it requires, so may a man tend the garden of his mind, weeding out all the wrong, useless, impure thoughts, and cultivating towards perfection the flower and fruits of right, useful, and pure thoughts. By pursuing this process, a man sooner or later discovers that he is the master gardener of his soul, the director of his life. He also reveals within himself the laws of thought and understands the ever-increasing accuracy how the thought forces and mind limits operate in the shaping of his character, circumstances, and destiny. Thought and character are one, and as character can only manifest and discover itself through environment and circumstances, the outer conditions of the person's life will always be found to be harmoniously related to his inner state. This does not mean that the man's circumstances at any given time are an indication of his entire character, but that those circumstances are so intimately connected with some vital thought element within himself that for the time being they are indispensable. Effect of thought on circumstances. Opportunity and circumstances. Deceptive and unmanly thoughts. Here is a rich man who is a victim of painful and persistent disease as a result of gluttony. He is willing to give large sums of money to get rid of it, but he will not sacrifice his gluttonous desires. He wants to gratify his taste for the rich and unnatural wants and have his health as well. Such a man is totally unfit to have health because he has not yet learned the first principle of healthy life. Here is an employer and a labor who adopts crooked measures to avoid paying the regulation wage and, in the hope of making larger profits, reduces the wage of his work people. Such a man is altogether unfitted for prosperity, and when he finds himself bankrupt both as regards to reputation and riches, he blames circumstances, not knowing that he is the sole author of his condition. I have introduced these three cases merely an illustration of the truth that man is a causer, though nearly always unconsciously, of his circumstances, and that while aiming at the good aim, he is continually frustrating is accomplishment by encouraging thoughts and desires which cannot possibly harmonize with that aim. Such cases could be multiplied and varied almost indefinitely, but this is not necessary, as the reader can, if he so resolves, trace the action of the laws of thought in his own mind and life, and until this is done, mere external facts cannot serve as a ground for reasoning. Circumstances, however, are so complicated, thought is so deeply rooted, and the conditions of happiness vary so wisely with the individual that a man's entire soul condition, although it may be known to himself, cannot be judged by another from external aspects of his life alone. A man may be honest in certain directions, yet suffer privations. A man may be dishonest in certain directions, yet acquire wealth. But the conclusion usually formed that the one who fails because of his particular honesty and the other prospers because of his particular dishonesty is the result of superficial judgment, which assumes that a dishonest man is almost totally corrupt and the honest man entirely virtuous. In the light of deeper knowledge and wider experience, such judgment is found to be erroneous. The dishonest man may have some admirable virtues which the other does not possess, and the honest man may obnoxious vices which are absent in the other. The honest man reaps the good results of the honest thoughts and acts. He also brings upon himself the sufferings which his vices produce. The dishonest man likewise garners his own suffering and happiness. It is possible, it is pleasing to human vanity to believe that one suffers because of one's virtue, but not until a man has extirpated every sickly, bitter, and impure thought from his mind and washed every sinful stain from his soul can he be in a position to know and declare that his sufferings are a result of his good and not of his bad qualities, and on the way to, yet long before he has reached that supreme perfection, he will have found working in his mind and life the great law which is absolutely just and which cannot therefore give good for evil, evil for good. Possessed of such knowledge, he will then know, looking back upon his past ignorance and blindness, that his life is always was justly ordered, and that all his past experiences, good and bad, were the equitable overworking of his evolving yet unevolved self. Good thoughts and actions can never produce bad results. Bad thoughts and action can never produce good results. That is but saying that nothing can come from corn but corn, nothing from nettles but nettles. Man understands this law in the natural world and work with it, but few understand it in the mental and moral world, though its operation there is just as simple and undeviating, and they therefore do not cooperate with it. Suffering is always the effect of the wrong thought in some direction. It is an indication that the individual is out of harmony with himself, with the law of his being. The soul and the supreme use of suffering is to purify, to burn out all that is useless and impure. Suffering ceases for him who is pure. There could be no object in burning coal after the dross has been removed, and perfectly pure and enlightened being could not suffer. The circumstances which a man encounters with suffering are the result of his own mental inharmony. The circumstances which a man encounters with blessedness are the result of his own mental harmony. Blessedness, not material possession, is a measure of the right thought. Wretchedness, not lack of material possession, is a measure of the wrong thought. A man may be cursed and rich. He may be blessed and poor. Blessedness and richness are only joined together when the richer are rightly and wisely used, and the poor man descends only into righteousness when he regards his lot as a burden unjustly imposed. Indigence and indulgence are the two extremes of wretchedness. They are both equally unnatural and the result of the mental disorder. A man is not highly conditioned until he is a happy, healthy and prosperous being, and happiness, health and prosperity are the result of harmonious adjustment of the inner with the outer, of the man with the surroundings. A man only begins to be a man when he ceases to whine and revile and commences to search for the hidden justice which regulates his life. And as he adapts his mind to that regulating factor, he ceases to accuse others as the cause of his condition and builds himself up in a strong and noble thought, ceases to kick against circumstances but begins to use them as to his more rapid progress and as a means of discovering the hidden powers and possibilities within himself. Law, not confusion, is the dominating principle in the universe. Justice, not injustice, is the soul and substance of life. The righteousness, not corruption, is the molding, moving force in the spiritual government of the world. This doing so, man has but to right himself to find that the universe is right, and during the process of putting himself right, he will find that as he alters his thoughts towards things and other people will alter toward him. The proof of this truth is in every person and is therefore adverse of easy investigation by systematic introspection and self-analysis. Let a man radically alter his thought, and he will be astonished at the rapid transformation if it will affect in the material conditions of his life. Man imagine that thought can be kept secret, but it cannot. It rapidly crystallizes into habit, and habit solidifies into circumstance. Bestial thoughts crystallize into the habits of drunkenness and sensuality, but solidify into circumstances of destination, and these impure thoughts of every kind crystallize into innovating and confusing thoughts, which solidify into distracting adverse circumstances. Thoughts of fear, doubt, indecision crystallize into weak, unmanly, and irresolute habits, which solidify into circumstances of failure, indigence, self-ravish, dependence, lazy. Thoughts of crystallize into habits of uncleanliness and dishonesty, which solidify into circumstances of foulness and bigotry. Hateful and condemnatory thoughts crystallize into habits of accusation and violence, which solidify into circumstances of injury and persecution. Selfish thoughts of all kinds crystallize into habits of self-seeking, which solidify into circumstances more or less distressing. On the other hand, beautiful thoughts of all kinds crystallize into habits of grace and kindness, which solidify into genial and sunny circumstances. Pure thoughts crystallize into habit of temperaments and self with goodwill for dispersing the shadows of grief and sorrow. To live continually in thoughts of ill will, cynicism, suspicion, and envy is to be confined in the self-made prison hole. But to think well of all, to be cheerful with all, to patiently learn to find the good in all, such unselfish thoughts are very portals of heaven, and to dwell day by day in thoughts of peace towards every creature will bring abounding peace to their possessor. Thought and purpose. Until thought is linked with purpose, there's no intelligent accomplishment. With the majority of the bark of thought is allowed to drift upon the ocean of life. Aimlessness is a vice, and such drifting must not continue for him who would stay clear of catastrophe and destruction. They who have no central purpose in their life fall on easy prey to petty worries, fears, troubles, and self-pitying, all of which are indications of weakness, which lead just as surely as deliberately planned sins, though by a different route, to failure, unhappiness, and loss, for weaknesses cannot persist in a power evolving universe. A man should conceive of a legitimate purpose in his heart and set out to accomplish it. He should make this purpose the crystalline point of his thoughts, centralizing point of his thoughts. It may take the form of the spiritual ideal, or it may be a worldly object according to his nature at the time being. But whichever it is, should be steadily focus his thought forces upon the object which he has set before him. He should make this purpose his supreme duty, and should devote himself to its attainment, not allowing his thoughts to wander away from into ephemeral fancies, longings, and imaginings. This is the royal road to self-control and true concentration of thought. Even if he fails again and again to accomplish his purpose, as he necessarily must until weakness is overcome, the strength of character gained will be the measure of his true success, and this will form a new starting point for future power and triumph. Those who are not prepared for the apprehension of a great purpose should fix their thoughts upon the faultless performance of their duty, no matter how insignificant their task may appear. Only in this way can the thoughts be gathered and focus and resolution and energy be developed, which being done, there is nothing which may not be accomplished. The weakest soul, knowing his own weakness and believing this truth, that strength can only be developed by effort and practice, will, thus believing, at once begin to exert itself, and adding effort to effort, patience to patience, and strength to strength, will never cease to develop, and will at last grow divinely strong. As the physically weak man can make himself strong by careful and patient training, so the man of weak thoughts can make them strong by exercising himself in right thinking. To put away aimlessness and weakness, and to begin to think with purpose, is to enter the ranks of those strong ones who only recognize failure as one of the pathways to attainment, who make all conditions of them, and who think strongly, attempt fearlessly, and accomplish masterfully. Having conceived of his purpose, a man should mark out a straight pathway to his achievement, looking neither to the left nor to right. Doubts and fears should be rigorously excluded. They are disintegrating elements which break up the straight line of effort, rendering it crooked and effectual useless. Thoughts of doubt and fear never accomplish anything and never can. They always lead to failure. Purpose, energy, power to do so are all strong thoughts. Sees when doubt and fear creep in. The will to do is spring from the knowledge that we can do. Doubt and fear are the great enemies of knowledge, and he who increases them does not slay them. Thoughts himself at every step. He who has conquered doubt and fear has conquered failure. His every thought is allied with power, and all difficulties are bravely met and wisely overcome. His purposes are seasonably planted, and they bloom and bring forth fruit that does not fall prematurely to the ground. Thought allied fearlessly to purpose becomes creative force. He who knows this is ready to become something higher and stronger than a mere bundle of wavering thoughts and fluctuating sensation. He who does this has become the conscious and intelligent wielder of his own powers. Wow, beautiful. Thought factor in achievement. All that a man achieves and all that he fails to achieve is the direct result of his own thoughts. It is justly ordered universe where loss of occupies would mean total destruction and individual responsibility must be absolute. A man's weakness and strength, purity, impurity are his own and not another man's. They are brought about by himself and not by another, and they can only be altered by himself, never by another. His condition is also his own and not another man's. His suffering and his happiness are evolved from within. As he thinks, so is he. As he continues to think, so he remains. A strong man cannot help a weaker unless that weak is willing to be helped. And even then, the weak man must become strong of himself. He must, by his own efforts, develop the strength which he admires in another, none but himself can alter his condition. It has been usual for men to think and say, many men are slaves because one is oppressor. Let us hate the oppressor. Now, however, there is amongst us an increasing fewer tendency to reverse this judgment and say one man is an oppressor because many are slaves. Let us despise the slaves. The truth is that oppressor and slaves are co-operated in ignorance, and while seeming to afflict each other, are in reality afflicting themselves. A perfect knowledge perceives the action of the law in the weakness of the oppressed and the misapplied power of the oppressor. A perfect love, seeing the suffering which both states entail, condemn neither. A perfect compassion embraces both oppressor and oppressed. He who has conquered weakness and has put away all selfish thoughts belongs neither to oppressor nor oppressed. He is free. A man can only rise, conquer, and achieve by lifting up his thoughts. He can only remain weak, abject, and miserably by refusing to lift up his thoughts. Before a man can achieve anything, even inwardly things, he must lift his thoughts above slavish animal indulgence. He may not, in order to succeed, give up all animality and selfishness, but by means of but a portion of it must at least be sacrificed. A man whose first thought is bestial indulgence could neither think clearly nor plan methodically. He could not find and develop his latent resources and would fail in any undertaking. Not having commenced manfully to control his thought, he is not in position to control affairs and to adopt serious responsibilities. He is not fit to act independently and stand alone, but he is limited only in the thoughts which he chooses. There can be no progress, no achievement without sacrifice, and a man's worldly success will be in the measure that he sacrifices his confused animal thoughts and fixes his mind on the development of his plans and strengthening of his resolution and self-reliance. And the higher he lifts his thoughts, the more manly, upright, and righteous he becomes, the greater will be his success, the more blessed and enduring will be his achievements. The universe does not favor the greedy, dishonest, and vicious, although on the mere surface it may sometimes appear to do so. It has the honest, magnanimous, the virtuous. All the great teachers of the ages have declared that in varying forms, and to prove and know it is a man that visions and idols. The dreamers are the saviors of the world. As the visible world is sustained by the invisible man, so through all the trials and sense-ordered vocations are nourished by the beautiful visions of the solitary dreamers. Humanity cannot forget its dreamers. It cannot let the ideals fade and die. It lives in them. It knows them as the realities which it shall one day see and know. Composer, sculptor, painter, poet, prophet, sage, these are the makers of the afterworld, the architects of heaven. The world is beautiful because they have lived. Without them, liberating humanity would perish. He who cherishes a beautiful vision, a lofty ideal in his heart, would one day realize that Columbus cherished a vision of another world and he discovered it. Copernicus fostered a vision of multiplicity of worlds in wider universe and he revealed it. Buddha held a vision of a spiritual world, stainless beauty and a perfect peace, and he entered into it. Cherish your visions, cherish your ideas, cherish the music that stirs in your heart, the beauty that forms in your mind, the loveliness that dreads your purest thoughts, for out of them will grow all delightful conditions, all heavenly environment of these. If you but remain true to them, your world will at last be built. To desires, to opinion, to aspires, to achieve, shall man's bestest desires receive the fullest measure of gratification, and his purest aspirations starve the lack of sustenance. Such is not the law, such is the condition of the things can never obtain, ask and receive, dream lofty dreams, and as you dream, so shall you become. Your vision is the promise of what you shall one day be. Your ideal is the prophecy of what you shall at last unveil. The greatest achievement was at first and for a time a dream. Oak sleeps in the acorn, the bird waits for in the egg, and the highest vision of the soul is waking. Angel stirs. Dreams are the seedlings of realities. Your circumstances may be uncongenial, but they shall not long remain so. If you only perceive an ideal and strive to reach it, you cannot travel within and stand still without. Here is a youth hard-pressed by poverty and labor, confined long hours in an unhealthy workshop, unschooled and lacking all arts of refinement, but he dreams of better things. He thinks of intelligence, of refinement, of grace and beauty. He conceives of mentally built up an ideal condition of life. The vision of a wider, large liberty and a larger scope takes possession of him, and rest urges him to action, and he utilizes all his spare time and means, small though they are, to the development of his latent powers and resources. Very soon, so altered has his mind become that the workshop can no longer hold him. It has become so out of harmony with his mentality that it falls out of his life as a garment is cast aside, and with the growth of opportunities that fit the scope of his expanding powers, he assets out of it forever. Years later, we see this youth as a full-grown man. We find him as a master of certain forces of the mind which he held with the worldwide influence and almost unequaled power. In his hands, he holds a cause of gigantic responsibilities. He speaks, and lo, lives have changed. Men and women hang upon his words and remold their characters and sunlight. He becomes the fixed and luminous center around which innumerable destinies revolve. He has realized the vision of his youth. He has become one with his ideal. And you, too, youthful reader, will realize the vision, not the idle wish of the heart, but is base and beautiful, or a mixture of both. For you will always gravitate towards that which you secretly most love. Into your hands will be placed the exact result of your own thoughts. You will receive that which you are, no more, no less. Whatever your present environment may be, you will fall, remain, or rise with your thoughts, your vision, your ideal. You will become as small as a controlling desire, as great as the dominant aspiration in the beautiful worlds. You may be keeping accounts, and presently you shall walk out of the door that for so long has seemed to you the barrier of your ideals, and shall find yourself become an audience. The pain still behind your ear, the inskins on your fingers, and then you shall pour out the torment of your inspiration. You may be driving sheep, and you shall wander to the city bucolic, or an open mouth shall wander under the intrepid guidance of the Spirit into the studio of a master, and after a time he shall say, I have nothing more to teach you, and now you have become the master who did so recently dream of great things while driving sheep. You shall lay down the saw and the plane to take upon yourself the regeneration of the world. The thoughtless, the ignorant, the indolent seeing only the apparent effects of things and not the things themselves, talk of luck, of fortune, of chance. Seeing a man grow rich, they say how lucky he is. Observing another become intellectual, they claim how highly flavored he is. And noting the saintly character and wide influence of another, they remark how chance aids him at every turn. They do not see the trials, the failures, the struggles which these men have encountered in order to gain their experience, have no knowledge of the sacrifices they have made, of the undaunted efforts they have put forth, of the faith they have exercised that they might overcome the apparently insurmountable and realize the vision of their heart. They do not know the darkness and the heartaches. They only see the light and joy and call it luck. Do not see the long and arduous journey, but only behold the pleasant goal and call it good fortune. Do not understand the process, but only perceive the result and call it chance. In all human affairs, there are efforts and there are results, and the strength of the effort is the measure of the result. Chance is not. Gifts, powers, material, intellectual, spiritual possessions are the fruits of the effort. They are thoughts, completed objects, accomplished visions realized, the vision that you glorify in your mind, the ideal that you enthrone in your heart. This you will build your life by. This you will become. This you will build your life by. This you will become. Yes, I'll become a good audio reader. Yes, we will shine Thinketh in the world. Yes, we'll take a stand for all the grants. We will audio record all the grants. We will unite, show our union with God. In that oneness will rise and shine. Vaheguru, 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 Vaheguru. Wow, feeling classic. As the man saying James Allen. Wow. I repent to have lost him. I repent to have lost him. He followed me everywhere, but I snubbed him off with an air. He pursued me to listen to his sincere wishes, to win his fame and all his riches, but I'm bored of hearing it said I and don't mind staying without a pie. His ego was hurt, his mind disturbed far off. He went like lightning until I could catch sight of him. I twisted in bed all through the night till the morning brought its light. I looked for him in lovely gardens. I climbed many mountains to reach him. I swam 1,000 oceans to search him. I even looked for him in deep valleys. I fasted for days together. I climbed many mountains to reach him. I even fasted for days together and meditated for years in succession. But alas, 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 all is in vain, for now I am aged, having nothing gained. I cannot read, nor can I write. Unsuccessful in life's every field. So my only request to you, young folks, is try and gain knowledge wherever you go. For he comes but once to persuade you and then flies away with time, never again to turn behind. Remember, education is the only 9-letter word that has all the vowels in it. Just as no word can be formed without a vowel, no man can be formed without education. So educate yourself now. Now turn around, see you have won. Education is the key to success. Please see, after reading this poem, a totally illiterate man asked his best friend to teach him ABCD, also the vowels A, E, I, O, U. Next day, he started praying to God. 5 times A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. And on he went on saying A, E, I, O, U, A, U, I, O, U, A, E, I, O, U, until it started sounding like E, I love you, A, I love you. On asking, he said God forms the words himself. So I'm doing prayer to God. And since he will need lots of A, I love yous, let's give our surrender unto God. Let him form the words himself. So we submit our all unto him. This little volume, the result of meditation and experience, is not intended as an exhaustive treatise or a much written upon subject of the power of thought. It is suggested rather than explanatory. Its object being to stimulate men and women to the discovery and perception of this truth that they themselves are the makers of themselves. By virtue of the thoughts which they choose and encourage, the mind, that is the master weaver both of the inner garment of character and the outer garment of circumstance, that as they may have hitherto woven in ignorance and pain, they may now weave in enlightenment and happiness, thought and character. The aphorism, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he, not only impresses the whole of a man's being, but is so comprehensive as to reach out to every condition and circumstances of his life. A man is literally what he thinks, his character being the complete sum of all his thoughts. As the plant sprang from and could not be without the seed, so every act of the man springs from his hidden seeds of thought. He could not have appeared without them. This applies equally to those that call spontaneous and unpremeditated, as those which are deliberately executed. Act is the bosom of thought, and joy, suffering are its fruits, and thus does the man garner in the sweet and the bitter fruitage of his own husbandry. Thought in the mind hath made us what we are. By thought we wrought and built for man's mind. Hath evil thoughts, pains comes on him as comes the wheel, the ox behind. If one endure the purity of thought, joy follows him as his own shadow sure. Man is a growth by law and not a creation by artifice, and cause and effect as absolute and undeviating in him. Hidden realm of the thought as in the world of the visible and material things. A noble and godlike character is not a thing of favor or chance, but a natural result of continual effort in the right thinking, the effect of long cherished association with godlike thoughts. An ignoble and bestial character by the same process is the result of continued harboring of groveling thoughts. Man is made by himself. In the armory of the thought he forges the weapons by which he destroys himself. He also fashions the tools with which he builds for himself heavenly mansions of joy and strength and peace. By the right choice and true application of the thought, man ascends to the divine perfection. By the abuse and the wrong application of thought, he descends below the level of the beast. Between these two extremes are all the grades of the character, and man is their maker and master.